Now, we know Prince Harry doesn't need the money, £50 million or whatever it's reported. So this is just about him getting his story out, isn't it?
I think it really is. There's been a lot written about how he's doing it for the money and this sort of thing, and obviously it is a hell of a lot of money, but they are rich people now, and from everything I hear, that's not his main motivation.
That's rich people can say that, can't they? That's, you know what I mean? It's like, it's not,
but let's be clear, his main motivation is revenge. You know, I heard this week from someone, a very sort of senior old friend of Prince Charles, who said that Prince Harry has always been very, very bitter about the royal family's treatment of his mother. And he's become more bitter over time about the royal family's treatment of him, and particularly Meghan. And this is revenge, essentially. This will all be, it's just a question of how damaging it will be. Will it be a little bit damaging for the royal family, or will, you know, he go the whole hog and make it extremely damaging?
I think revenge makes it sound like the sort of baddies and goodies. You know? I think
that does seem to be the narrative that he's constructed.
I think that might be the fallout from this peculiar Californian construct. I wonder if there isn't also quite a lot of Harry who needs self-validation, Harry who also enjoys being in the limelight. I agree with you, it's not just about the money, it's about the buzz. He likes it. It's obvious he likes being number one, the centre of attention. Who doesn't?
Despite decamping to America for privacy?
Oh, well, OK, that was a byline, wasn't it, darling? That was why we took off in our jet, you know. We needed space from you lot, you know, but quite frankly not from the great embrace of America. And I think that is bigger, perhaps, for Harry, that at the moment the heat's on them. How do you keep the water boiling? You know, every famous person has this problem. You know, once you're at the peak, staying there is a
royals
problem.
don't have that problem.
No, but he's no longer royal.
Exactly.
So he has to maintain the momentum. And I would argue that it's a little premature. Of course, he's going to... I didn't realise this when I first heard the news. He's cashing in, is that the word to use, on the momentum from the Platinum Jubilee, which is a little cynical. Now, if you look, history tells us this has been done before. Abdicated Edward VIII, one of the most famous men in the world, when he abdicated.
Didn't he wait 18 months for his?
No. Darling, he waited 14 years.
Oh, sorry, yeah.
So a decent stretch of time. And the reason he bought it out was he was fearful that actually the authorised biography of his brother, who was then King, George VI, was going to spill beans. And also Stanley Baldwin, the former Prime Minister, might be writing a biography, etc. So out he comes with his. The timing's very good and clever in that respect. I think it's 1951. He abdicates in 36. And it makes quite a lot of money. He's got a very good co-writer, ghostwriter, and it does very well. But he's waited 14 long years. And incidentally, the subsequent two books didn't do very well. So if you're going to blow it, you know, I would say hold your horses, Harry. Because you can't say, oh, it's about the man I've become. You've only had a year and a half at the firm. You know, what man have you become?
But, you know, clearly the publishing house will want their return on investment. So we have to assume that there's going to be some... more truth bombs, some big revelations.
But we know there will be, Richard. I mean, I'm sure you've read up on the guy who's actually writing it, because Harry ain't writing this. You don't learn how to write at Sandhurst.
Yeah, I mean, I think because in the past we've just sort of heard in Harry's words, like in the infamous Oprah interview, and it's all been a bit sort of clumsy, whereas with this ghostwriter, I'm sure it will be an excellent book. You know, he's a terrific writer, and in the case of Andre Agassi, you know, it was a very powerful story.
Tessa, Harry may well argue that both of his parents wrote books at the height of their divorce proceedings to tell their story. Is that a fair comparison?
It is. It would be a strange one for Harry to use, given that those books saw his parents move ever faster down this catastrophic road, which ended horribly in an acrimonious divorce, and ultimately, of course, Diana outside the firm. We know how the story ends. It's horrible. So I don't think that would be a route or an argument Harry would want to go down. Of course, he could say, people write about me all the time. Omid Scobie, Robert Lacey, you've got his book over there. I see, you know, people are always going to be pumping out books. The difference is, this is Harry's own take. He's signed it off. We know he's Murringer, this very talented writer, is going to be interpreting Harry's story, but Harry will give it the sign-off. Now, all I would say to Harry, I was a warning shot across the bows, There's something about putting people's stories in books. I do it for a living. It's different from writing a newspaper article. It's different from saying something on a podcast.
Well, what's interesting is your story is also somebody else's story.
Exactly. And actually, once you've had it said in a book, once it's there, a tome for eternity, always to be tapped up in the British Library, ain't going to go away. You can't take that back. I nearly killed my marriage with the first book I wrote. And when I write about...
I really want to read that book now.
Old women. Well, I didn't publish it in the language of my husband's native country because he wouldn't allow me. It was a big mistake. I regret it. There's few things I regret in life, and that's one of them. And I would also say that... actually, I've totally forgotten what I was going to say next. I was so busy thinking about that disaster in my marriage.
Wow.
You can't take it back, Harry. You can't rescind it. Oh, yeah, the women I write about today, I get them to sign off their extracts. And you're right. It's not them always, it's their daughters that are worried, or their sons, or their husbands. There's a whole sort of, we are the people around us.
I mean, my truth isn't mine without everybody. They love that phrase, my truth, but there's a lot of people involved in this very famous family in this story.
Well, Harry has been saying, it's going to be very honest and this sort of thing. But again, this shows how unfair it is, because just like their Oprah interview, he will be writing about people who can't answer back. And that's the whole point of the royal family. The Queen her entire life has managed to maintain that
I feel sorry for him.
Well, we'll be waiting. It's pretty standard in book publishing timelines. We'll be waiting till the end of 2022, a relatively short time, actually, for a book deadline. But that's a long time for the royal family to wait to see what's in this book, isn't it?
Oh, my goodness. I mean, there will be endless stories speculating about what will be in the book. And the whole process will be damaging for the royal family.
Do you know what? I know you're going to disagree with this, Richard. I actually feel sorry for him because I think he's trapped in this sort of existential nightmare of having to compete with the royal family. Like, kind of, I can outgun you. Look, I'm bigger than you. My stories are capping yours, and they have done this.
But he could retreat from that.
Yeah, he
could
no
just
need
have
to
his private
whatsoever.
life.
But I don't think he knows how to, and he's a bit addicted to it. It's very addictive, fame and fortune. It's an incredible adrenaline hit. He's crashing down this ugly cul-de-sac. I worry for him.
What do you... Sorry, carry on.
I was just going to say, I do think we're getting a sort of element of good cop, bad cop with Meghan, and Harry's not coming out well. Last week, we were on this programme talking about the big Sussex announcement last week, which was a Meghan TV project for Netflix, and that was all very positive about her as a feminist role model. And the next week, it's bad Harry. It's going to be spilling the beans with his tell-all memoir.
Yeah.
And it seems to be... This is a narrative which Harry's falling into, of he's the one making the claims, making allegations, and Meghan's rising above that.
What do you think of the choice of ghostwriter? This J.R. Murring, who's done lots of celebrity biographies. We mentioned Andre Agassi.
Tell you what, he ain't coming cheap, that bloke.
Interestingly, it won't be Harry's first ghostwriter, because when he was at Eton, one of the teachers, it was his art tutor, said that she had ghostwritten his part of his A-level art project.
Well, I wish I'd had that at school.
And no, this was totally crucial, because he had to get an A-level pass to get into the elite academy of military academy at Sandhurst. And this teacher was eventually sacked, but she took Eton to an employment tribunal, won her case for unfair dismissal. And she had helped Harry get through this exam, and she described herself as his ghostwriter.
Well, of course, Prince Harry and Eton have both denied that he ever cheated, but
I think Murring is interesting. First of all, he isn't cheap. He's the best of the best. He managed to make that Phil Knight, who was the co-founder of Nike, look good. I mean, for goodness sake, all the accusations around Nike sweatshops and tax dodging, goodness, no, he managed to make us feel sympathetic for the guy who came in with swoosh, And then there was Andre Agassi. We didn't get a straight tennis memoir there. We got, a man who hated his sport, a man who kind of hated his father.
I think that's
interesting, isn't it?
That's the similarities that might worry Prince Charles is. Definitely the villain of Agassi's memoir was his domineering, cold, distant father. And also it was about I hate tennis. That was the big revelation of Agassi's book. This is going to be...
Well, I hate the royalty is not a revelation. It's just not anymore.
No.
But there'll be... You know what it's like when you read a good book and Moringa knows how to write a good book. I think his biography is currently being made into a film by the Clooneys.
By
Isn't
George
that
Clooney, no
possibly
doubt,
the
who introduced
connection?
them.
The connection.
Yeah.
So I think it'll be a good read. So it'll get a huge audience.
Yeah.
I also think you'll find there are revelations, and they will be uncomfortable. I'm going to just remind you of our two former residents of Number 10. Sherry Blair's memoir, sold off the back of failed contraception or non-existent contraception.
That's right. Yes,
Heaven
they
forbid.
conceived at Balmoral.
Sorry to remind you of that, everyone.
Yeah.
And David Cameron. This is the, Brexit's Frankenstein, but actually all we cared about was, did he tell the Queen to come out against Scottish independence?
Yeah, it's very true. I mean, just one last thing, slightly changing tack, but yet, this sort of like narrative against how dreadful it is being part of the royal family, but he wants to come back and christen Lilibet in the UK. Any thoughts to share?
That was a story that broke in my column last Saturday. And I've heard lots of people since saying, oh no, they're going to be punished, the Sussexes, they won't be having invitations to the Platinum Jubilee celebrations, or that christening's not going to happen. Well, from everything I hear, it's quite the opposite.
Yeah.
The royal family has to try to draw them in as much as possible. So those invitations won't be stopped. It will be the opposite. They will be trying to sort of reach out to them and make sure this book is not as damaging as it possibly could
You're
be.
keeping body language experts all around the country in business.
But also it makes them look bigger than the book. Rise above it, and they can. Why? Because they're in the ultimate gilded cage that is the monarchy.
That's all we have for you on our YouTube show. But to see the rest of this episode, including some more fascinating royal revelations, head to www.mailplus.co.uk/royals or click the link on screen now.